We're about to feature some remarkable Australians. Aussies who've climbed to the highest peaks, Aussies who've paddled the longest rivers, and Aussies who've walked from one side of Australia to the other. Classic challenges. Why do they do it? Well, we're about to feature their stories and meet those remarkable characters and explain the reasons why in this episode of Travel Oz. G'day, welcome, I'm Greg Granger.
Ahead, they've scaled the highest peaks, skied to both North and South Poles, paddled from one continent to another, and joined an exhausting canoe challenge down one of Australia's biggest rivers. Classic Aussie challenges. Compelling, exhausting.
Well, it's looking remarkably relaxed. Looks like a picnic, but in fact, in a few minutes' time, these 145 paddlers will be paddling their hearts out down the Hawkesbury River in the Hawkesbury Classic.
They're Australia's keenest long-distance kayakers, gathering on the banks of the Hawkesbury River in the historic town of Windsor.
Welcome everyone to the 2023 Hawkesbury Classic Paddle. After 3 years of cancelled events, we're back on the river and looking forward to a fantastic night. This year we've got 150 odd paddlers in 100 craft. Most of them are taking part in the 111 kilometre event. We look forward to welcoming you at the finish.
This briefing comes after competitors have made their final preparations, checking out their craft and making sure they've got torches, their GPS trackers and lots of drinking water and energy bars. Among the contestants preparing today, Richard Barnes. He's not long back from paddling from Australia to New Zealand across the Tasman, the first person to ever do so, solo and unassisted. What kayakers have to do today is first register. It's going to be important for organisers to know who's on the river and with the aid of their trackers know exactly where they are for safety checks. Then there's the pre-race kayak check. These volunteer scrutineers need to make sure every single kayaker has their life jackets, maps, compass lights and that their kayak has suitable flotation. So who's going to test their body and endurance today? Peter Manley is likely to be the first across the finish line with his paddling mate Brendan Trewatha.
We're eyeing off the over 50s doubles record. Can we do it? Question, but we're very hopeful.
First woman to finish is likely to be Naomi Johnson.
Naomi, you look like being the first fastest lady.
I hope so, yes. I've been the fastest female paddler before,
Yes.
which was really exciting. Back in 2019, I was trying to break a time of about 10 hours 49 or something, and I came in 9 hours 28.
And then there's the Fossils Afloat team, high-spirited ladies all over 50 years old.
Julia, Fossils Afloat. You're not that old, are you?
No, we're not. We're very young at heart.
Where'd you come up with that name?
This was down to one of our fellow paddlers, Lise, who decided that the group we were going to be was over 50s, so it was suggestion was Fossils Afloat, so we agreed it was the best one.
All this in the name of charity. Some $70,000 will be raised today for the Arrow Foundation.
The Hawkesbury Canoe Classic have raised over $4 million for Arrow over the past 30 years. So it's quite a phenomenal fundraising effort and a fantastic event. So we're very, very happy to be part of it at Arrow. It really makes a huge difference to what we do in helping bone marrow and stem cell transplant patients.
And then it's down to the water.
On the occasion of the 2023 Hawkesbury Classic, on your marks, get set, go!
There's a long way to go for paddlers. Some of them will be paddling hard for the next 18 hours. Exhausting. And they're stroking hard from the get-go. Stroke, stroke, stroke. It's enough to give you a stroke. Richard Barnes is such a powerhouse, he's solo paddling a double kayak, and I've hitched a ride to get some shots.
So Richard, how many Hawkesbury Classics have you done?
This hopefully will be number 40.
40 Hawkesbury Classic. You even do it when it's not running.
true. There are 3 bonus extra ones, so it's truly the 43rd. I counted the COVID and flood years in my count.
So, Richard, you're not aiming to set a record today, are you?
Not at all. Finish is fine.
So what is your plan today?
So go slow, enjoy, talk to everyone, have a party. Hopefully it'll be full moon, so it'll be beautifully light, all good things.
Overtaking us there is Naomi Johnson. She'll keep up that pace for the entire event. It's a non-stop marathon with just 2 major checkpoints along the entire river length. A true test of character and stamina. John Duffy, who's the entrant coordinator, is powering downstream. He'll do this challenge in 10 hours, 28 minutes. So, how's it feel, John?
Oh, look, you're very tired, but you get that burst of energy with a couple of kilometres to go. I think it's one of the best feelings in the world, finishing an event like this.
What follows is a hard night of paddling.
Congratulations, you're the first boat in.
First in, as we predicted, the doubles team of Peter Manley and Brendan Trewatha.
It was good. It was a good race.
You're as fresh as a daisy.
Oh, I wish that was the case. No, we're pretty happy with the time. Didn't get the record, but we're 8:35, so that's pretty good.
Marcus Adler is one of the timekeepers.
They did it extremely well. Didn't quite make the record, but they were through here with only in 8 hours and 35 minutes.
That's a pretty impressive paddle.
We were surprised. We were watching them. They've got GPS markers on them for the first time this year, and so we could actually track them as they were coming down the river. And last time I checked in, they were doing 15 kilometres an hour.
Then a steady stream of finishes. As was forecast, first woman across the line, Naomi Johnson.
I'm pretty wrecked. It was hard work. I came into Wiseman feeling really, really good, and then it all got a bit hard afterwards because I was trying to stick on some double wash rides, and of course when you're working that bit harder, it just gets hard. But look, it feels awesome to finish. It felt awesome to be at so many different points in the river.
The Hawkesbury Canoe Classic. Indeed, a true test of human endurance.
Well, now to a man who's in his 70s, climbs a mountain peak up in his Blue Mountains home several times a week, and he was the first Aussie to summit Mount Everest. He is Greg Mortimer.
Whenever I've encountered Greg Mortimer, he's in the midst of a new challenge, whether it's leading me and others over the subantarctic island of South Georgia in the wake of the famous explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton.
So I'm going to head sort of over there and then back around onto the Murray snowfield.
Or climbing without safety ropes straight up a sheer cliff in high winds in the Blue Mountains of Australia. The Blueies, in fact, are Greg's backyard. He scales a mountainside several times a week.
Look, I've done it since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it's just like breathing, really. And instead of going to church, I go climbing. And I guess it's how I view the world as well. It's the lens that I look at the world through. It demands your complete attention.
Yes.
Otherwise you fall off and hurt yourself. And, if you're high up on a cliff, it's a bit scary. And so you have to be completely there in your head.
Intense focus concentration.
Yeah.
So there was one particular event that has changed your life, the successful climb of Everest?
I was a manic climber.
Yes.
And had been for a long time.
Yes.
So going to Everest just came along as an opportunity. And it was not high on my agenda, really, to go and climb Everest. I just like going climbing.
Yes.
Rather than feeling a desire to climb the highest mountain.
So, Greg, we're looking at some video of you climbing there, and it certainly was quite blowy. This is October, quite late in the season.
Yes, we were there in the post-monsoon as a little group of naive Australian young men, and trying to climb a new route on Everest that hadn't been climbed before, and without oxygen. So that was the cheapest way of doing it, the most efficient, we thought. And it was from go to woe a mystery. You know, we didn't know what we were going to befall or would befall us, and we were kind of making it up as we went along.
Yeah.
And so it's literally one step at a time.
And so you make that step with Tim McCartney's snake onto the summit.
Yeah.
Can you remember that feeling?
It's tattooed on the underside of my eyelids, the whole thing. The view and the feeling. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's burnt into my brain.
So to that point, how hard was it? What sort of a challenge or effort was it?
How to explain that? Look, we're pretty close to sea level here. There's only a third of the amount of oxygen that there is at sea level, and we were very, very fit. I guess Olympic standard fit. But at limit of endurance in one go, you can do 5 to 7 steps. And then you've got to stop and get over the oxygen debt. So it feels like your lungs are collapsing.
So you're feeling knackered?
Completely spent after 7 steps. And then you stop, you slump on your ice axe, and you take 2 minutes, something like that, to get over the oxygen debt. So you're just gulping thin air in to fill your lungs again, and then you do another 7 steps.
Okay, so that final step is on the summit. You've been feeling exhausted, but how are you feeling then when you hit that summit? You're at the top, all that effort.
You know, you'd expect that it was this near religious experience.
Yes.
But what happened for me was that step onto the summit, a trigger went off in my head, like that. And it was, got to get down. Got to get down. Because that's when people get messed up on the way down. People get killed repeatedly on big mountains on the way down.
And so people would say, why on earth do you do these things?
What the hell are you doing? Yeah. I've really stopped trying to figure it out too deeply.
Yes.
I've stopped trying to ask myself, and I have asked for a long, long time in my own head, why in the hell? But it's quite simplistic at one level. I just really like it, you know? I like standing on top of things and looking around.
So Greg, you've reached that summit. You can't go any higher. You're looking around at the world and it's all below you. And what are you thinking you're going to do next? How do you move on from a challenge like that?
Well, first you get down safely.
Yes.
Then you have a big party.
Yes.
And then, in my experience, spend several decades trying to figure out what the hell that means.
And so we leave Greg Mortimer as he heads out this day for yet another adventure.
Well, now to a woman who's summited on the peaks, the highest peaks of all 7 continents. She's even scaled Mount Everest with her daughter, the first mother-daughter duo to ever do that. She's also skied to the North Pole and the South Pole. She is Cheryl Bart.
She's accomplished extraordinary feats, a powerful lawyer, director of multiple major corporations, and a super athlete who's followed the world's leading explorers to both poles and the famous 7 summits.
So there's a thing called the 7 Summits. It's the most expensive book you could ever possibly buy, which is the tallest mountain on each continent.
Yes.
And when my daughter and I began this conquest, obviously Everest was one of the 7, but that was even beyond our wildest ever dreams.
Yes.
So we just did one, which was way beyond our comfort zone, and then another one, but it was always out there on the horizon. But the moment we committed to it was when we had successfully summited and reached back to the bottom of a mountain called Choi Oyu, which is the 6th tallest mountain.
Having reached the summit in 6 continents, Cheryl and her daughter Nicole reached the peak of Mount Everest.
The sun was just, we got there just before sunrise. We climbed too quickly. And then the sun started to rise, and it was, for me, a feeling of being in a place I shouldn't be. A feeling of something very holy, something very sacred, and kind of a feeling of, okay, I'll just back away from this. Thank you very much for allowing me the privilege of being here. There was no, men talk of conquering and conquest. There was no feeling of that. It was a feeling of humble gratitude. And I want to get back the hell down. We are still the only mother-daughter to have successfully completed the 7 summits, and then I've gone on to do the Explorers Grand Slam, which is skiing unsupported to the North Pole
Yes.
and skiing unsupported to the South Pole. I found the South Pole arduous because, as I said, you couldn't really gauge time or distance, and it's just a long, long slog. And I gauged it by the number of songs I sang. If I sang X number of songs, it would be an hour, and I'd have it in my earphone. I don't know if you've just seen the movie Naiad, and she's singing songs, or I tell myself poetry, and gauge it. Whereas the North Pole, there are these enormous sastrugi, which is ice sheets which come against each other up into these enormous walls. And you also have to chop them to go through them or climb over them without falling into the incredibly freezing water and become hypothermic and maybe die.
So you've done the 7 summits, you've done the North and South Pole, and the question would be, our viewers asking, why? Why are you doing these things?
Everyone always asks that.
Yes.
Look, I always say I'm a person who, I like to collect people and I like to collect experiences.
Yes.
And this is a pretty amazing out there experience. You know, my daughter and I experienced different cultures, some of the most extraordinary parts of the planet that really not many people have the opportunity to go to.
Yes.
We had the opportunity to test ourselves and our limits, and it's extraordinary how far you can go.
Yes.
So to me, I'm too fast to be able to meditate, but for me that's a physical meditation. All the things people say they gain from meditation, I have when I'm climbing.
Yes.
And it's just, test. I'm not an adrenaline junkie, I'm not that, but it's a testing and a learning and an exploring. I love to explore.
Well, here now is a remarkable athlete. He's cycled around Australia, he's run around Australia, and he's just set the record for paddling down the Murray River. He is David Alley.
When I catch up with David on the far north coast of New South Wales, he's out jogging, then kayaking, all within the space of 15 minutes. And all that only one day since he finished his exhausting record-breaking paddle down the Murray River.
Big paddle, 14 days. How are you feeling?
Greg, I'm actually quite good. Physically, I'm well. I've pulled up a lot better than I thought I would.
Yes.
Just tired, fatigue, and just trying to manage that fatigue and get back into normal life.
How were you feeling when you were doing it?
On this paddle, it was tough in that we got all the way down to the start at Bringambrong Bridge and discovered that the flow rates were a lot less than what we were hoping for. So a third of the flow as the other guys have done in previous attempts. So the flow was low. We had headwinds the whole way. So given that, I had to adjust the hours I spent in the kayak to get the job done. But look, in saying that, we were the first person that I'm aware of that's ever gone from Bringambrong Bridge and got to Lake Hume, the village, in one day. So it was about a 200 kilometre day on day one. So huge. Left at 3:08 a.m. and got in there at just after midnight. It really gets to you mentally, having to battle through headwinds, having to battle with the flow. As I said, the flow was a big one, so that was not in my favour. So they're tough challenges mentally, and then when they start to compile, as the sleep deprivation kicks in. So as each day wore on, we became more and more fatigued, and the wind just didn't abate, and it became tough. It was certainly more of a mental challenge than a physical challenge, I would say.
You must have been seeing some good stuff while you're out there.
Oh, look, fantastic. It's part of Australia that I haven't actually explored. And to go down there and see that part of the country, and it was just amazing. The countryside is so varied and changed each day, and the animal life was amazing, the scenery fantastic, and just what a great way to see the Murray River.
And of course you've not only kayaked, you've done record-breaking jogging.
Yeah, so ran around Australia in 2015 and broke the record to do that, and cycled around Australia and have the record for that as well. So cycled around in 2011. The bike was a fantastic experience in 2011. I couldn't believe the support I received in doing that, and then backed it up in 2015 with the run. I thought I was happily retired, and that was the end of the ultra endurance game for me. But look, we've done the paddle now, and it was fantastic. Look, I think with these things, for me, it's because it's there. It's there, and I think when you push the boundaries, for me, it's about leaving your comfort zone behind, have it in the rear view mirror and pushing myself and seeing what I'm actually capable of, and it makes me feel alive. Having that feeling of taking on a challenge that I'm not sure can be completed, others are telling me can't be done, and pushing myself mentally and physically to that limit. When you do pull it off and you achieve it, it's a level of satisfaction that I can't describe. You know, I don't do this for fame, I don't do it for fortune, I do it to push myself and see what I'm capable of, and that feeling of satisfaction, it never leaves you.
Well, now for a young lady who's walked from the tip of Tasmania to the tip of Cape York. She is Jenna Brooks.
Last year I ran from South Cape Bay in Tasmania up to the very tip of Cape York in Queensland. It was 4 months of running. We averaged about 45 kilometres a day. Gave about 7 or 8 pairs of runners a really good run for their money. It was hard work for sure, and I certainly tested them to their limits. I think at the end of the day it was really a case of, you know, 75% mental and 35% physical by the time I really got into it. It's one thing to run, you know, a marathon or a couple of marathons. When you sort of are backing up 110 or 115 marathons day after day, it's almost purely mental by the time you sort of get sort of even a third of the way through it.
Now for the man who's just been named the Australian Adventurer of the Year. He's recently paddled across the Tasman, the first man to ever do that solo and unassisted. He is Richard Barnes.
Richard, a 62-year-old structural engineer from Sydney, has just paddled 1,700 kilometres single-handedly and unassisted from Australia to New Zealand.
Richard, at what point in your life did you say, I want to paddle from Australia to New Zealand?
So there was a defining point. 9 years ago, I was with a group of scouts, New Year's Eve, New Year's resolutions. I said to them, I'm going to do it.
Why?
Why? Why? Hillary answered that, didn't he? Because it's there. But because it's so peaceful out there. It is beautiful out there.
So there are not too many challenges left in the world, are there?
True.
Firsts, real true firsts.
Which didn't really matter, didn't need to be a first, but that was sort of a bonus.
First attempt?
Well, starting from Port Macquarie, heading out towards Lord Howe Island. Yes. That was when COVID was on, and so I knew that I couldn't land in New Zealand, they would turn me away. So it was a halfway and halfway back. Then I got a cyclone just off Lord Howe. That made the decision easier to turn back.
Wow. So you've turned back and you didn't give up. You've gone again. This time you decided not to go from Port Macquarie, you decided to go from way south Tasmania.
Hobart, it's closer. Rather than 2,200 kilometres from Port Macquarie, only 1,700 kilometres from Hobart, and more westerly winds.
So what sort of preparation? You built your own boat?
Did, yes. So started with a Mirage double, like what I'm in, and stretched it, made a hull out of that, made the deck with foam core and a timber mould, so I could make it to my design. So I could have a sleeping area and a vestibule area.
So off you go, and you've got no media coverage at all. You deliberately didn't want sponsors, no media coverage.
Yes, that takes pressure off, definitely. Especially not having sponsors, there's less commitment. But I realised along the way that commitment comes from friends' involvement, and so I had to go. There was no way out of it at that moment.
Sure. So off you go, and conditions were quite reasonable when you get out there, initially?
Most of the way they were. Most of the way. 90% of the time they were just plodding along through medium-sized waves. Just a little bit. Maybe 5% of the time was a little bit more what a friend called sporty.
Yes.
But then there was another 5% when it was incredibly calm.
So let's talk about the good times. The good times, what are you thinking?
Thinking how peaceful it is.
Yes.
How this is a release from all the pressures of city life. Responsibility, you can't get away from it any other way.
So Richard, you're off the boat. Here's a photograph of you away from the kayak. What on earth were you thinking? That could have floated away.
So there were 3 times I had to get out of the boat.
Yes.
Twice to get barnacles off.
Yes.
And then one time I just had this great urge to try and get a picture of the whole boat. I didn't have the drone, so how was I going to get far enough away?
Yes.
So I just unclipped and swam away from the boat on a very calm day and got that photo.
So no fear that you were going to become permanently separated from the kayak?
No, this was a very calm day.
Let's talk about the 5% hard times. How hard were those hard times?
So I did get capsized twice.
Yeah.
One while I was sleeping, so it was a surprise. So the boat was self-righting, so I didn't have to do that. And the first one was while I was asleep, so I was inside, I couldn't have righted it myself. It solved that problem, it came back up again.
Yes.
The other one was paddling along. It wasn't that rough a day, but I just got surprised by a big wave breaking on me.
Yeah.
Tipped over.
All right, so all this paddling, 66 days?
67. Can't forget one day.
67 days, and there's the New Zealand Coast Guard come out to meet you.
Indeed, indeed. But really the excitement was on about day 61 when I first saw land. That really was very special.
And so you still took those extra 6 days to actually make it to land?
I'd gone a long, long way south. Not on purpose, the wind had just blown me south and took those extra 6 days from when I first saw Stewart Island to plod my way back up to somewhere I could land on the mainland of South Island.
Wow, wow. So you hit land, and how's the feeling of elation when you hit land there?
It's certainly pretty special. To see people again, part of my family was there, and so it was very exciting to see them, to step onto land. My legs wouldn't work, so I had to borrow my dad's walking stick because my legs just would like jelly.
Is that right?
It took 2 days.
2 days before you could walk properly. Well, I do hope you've enjoyed those adventures in this episode of Travel Oz. I'm Greg Granger. Happy travels.